Hog is in a pretty rough state. His one-shot is pretty much gone, and whilst the spam capability has gotten better, you might as well just play Sigma for spam. The death of his one-shot also means that you can no longer solo flank as before, and that Hog has kind of lost his identity in Overwatch.
The problem with the lack of one-shot is Roadhog's identity is about controlling flanks, but if I can't hook one-shot, then I'm like significantly worse at doing my job. I don't win every 1v1.
But if you're really adamant on playing Hog, treat your hook like a CC displacement tool rather than a one-shot button, similar to Orisa's Holt in Overwatch 1. Utilise your higher burst damage to bully close range heroes and exert higher point presence, kind of like a bulky Zarya without the bubbles, and look for small off angles to drag enemies into your team. Hog's weapon, the worst shotgun in the game, makes Hog blast 25 pellets of shrapnel in 2 firing modes, dealing 6 damage per pellet. His secondary fire makes him launch a ball of shrapnel, dealing 50 damage unless it detonates at 8 meters. They both deal up to 150 damage with a 0.2 rate of fire and 6 shots in a clip. The main usage of your scrap gun now is going to be for consistent tank busting. Your DPS is on paper actually quite high at roughly 190, so keep short to medium sightlines to burst down or pressure tanks, especially those with large hitboxes like Ramarcha or Reinhardt, and to a lesser extent Orisa, and that's how you're going to be getting value now. The last thing to mention is your trigger discipline. It's good that you now have a better recovery time and more ammo, but especially against mobile targets such as Tracer, it's not uncommon for Hogs to completely whiff the anti-clip on them. The solution here is to just take an extra half a second to chill out and readjust your crosshair, as Barlow explains here.
Zens have this problem too in close range duels against Genji. You will win so many more duels as Zen versus Tracer and Genji if you actually chill out and click your individual shots instead of panicking. Same thing with Roadhog, except it's even more important because you only have 5 shots and your fire rate's lower. Like that Hog, if he took a 1/10 of a second longer or a 1/4 of a second longer to shoot his shots, he would have killed that Tracer. Chill out. That's my biggest feedback for Hogs that are struggling in those duels is chill out.
Hog's first ability, basically an Orisa Holt now, makes Hog throw a chain at the targets, pulling them in close range. The hook now deals 5 damage, has a cooldown of 8 seconds, and a maximum range of 20 meters. Let's get over what used to be your one-shot combo. Whilst you can't consistently one-shot with this in your games, it's still worth knowing to maximize your burst damage when you pull in an enemy. Firstly, soften up your target with a right click first, then walk forward and toss your hook. Walk forward during your hook cast time, and then do a primary fire and melee. Now, there is one big clarification with your melee. Most of the time, with the new Hog, you actually don't want to be doing this. Thanks to the new patch, when you hook an enemy, they end up 4 meters away from you instead of the 3. And considering you have a faster fire rate, you also want to be getting that second shot off quicker. So, unless you absolutely need the melee damage to finish off a low target, don't bother with the melee. Still, even with all of this performed perfectly, you'll still struggle to one-shot some heroes based on hitboxes and distance. You can be cheeky against some heroes and walk a little bit forward before you do your primary fire, but if you walk too long, heroes like Tracer, Moira, Mei, Reaper, etc. can use their survival cooldowns to escape your follow-up. I'd also like to touch on crosshair placements. In short, you want to be aiming somewhere in the upper body region to maximise the amount of pellets hitting the heads. Here's a visual example way back in my old Hog guides. As you can see here, Griffo hooks the Ashe without pre-firing, which is his first mistake. However, the more overlooked mistake is that his crosshair is not placed on Ashe's upper body, meaning that half the pellets don't hit, which makes the Ashe survive. There's also turning your camera after hooking, which can drag the enemy up to 45 degrees either side. Especially considering Hog can't one-shot anymore, and that you absolutely need follow-up to land a hook kill, dragging an enemy into your team just by turning your camera has the potential to make a big difference. You can also land some environmental kills with this too, so that's a plus. In terms of who do you hook people who you think are easy to kill and or are dangerous. Before, easy to kill just meant whether you could one-shot them. Now, that means whether you and your team can land significant follow-up on them, which is why tank busting is a bit more of a viable playstyle now. As Anima, a tier 3 coach, describes here, Hook is now like an Orisa Holt back in Overwatch 1, but used on a singular target. You need follow-up to get the most value out of it. It's also disrupting ultimates with Hook, since, unlike Holt, it's hard CC. Saving Hook for Barrage, Blossom, Flux, Coalescence, or High Noon are obviously good ideas in order to shut down a potential play. Lastly, just make sure you have enough ammo to actually follow up on your hook. Hog's second ability, the 1 second Transcendence, makes Hog heal himself with 350 HP in 1 second with a cast time of 2 seconds. The cooldown is 8 seconds long with a 50% damage reduction during the cast time. Firstly, since Hog's damage reduction actually applies throughout the entirety of the cast time, you can use your breather just before a massive amount of burst damage is about to occur. But the main usage of your breather is just for defensive reasons. Similar with Arna Sleep and Orisa Fortify, with them being defensive cooldowns, there's no better tip than to just not use it if you don't need it. One of Breather's main uses is to help Hog escape type situations, not to proactively use it. If you're feeling the heat, then use your breather. Not that complicated. One slight nuance is that if you're guaranteed safety, and if the fight is over, it might be worth letting your supports heal you up instead for ult charge, as Spalo explains here.
Big thing with Vape is you want to avoid using it if you're guaranteed safe and your supports aren't doing anything else, and your supports don't have ult charge. So Hog's ult is so mediocre. I mean, it's better now, but it's still generally inferior to support ults, so it's almost always better if you're safe and your supports aren't doing anything to let your supports get the ult charge from healing you, than you healing yourself.
Hog's ultimate, the Terminator, makes Hog cram a mechanical device onto a scrap gun, churning out a stream of shrapnel, having the potential to deal up to 900 DPS, lasting for 6 seconds. I'm not going to get into the niche animation cancels, straight onto the usage. Pressure relief. Essentially, if you're being dove, or if the enemy team are trying to walk onto you with things like Spear Spin and Lucio Speed, using Whole Hog can relieve a great deal of pressure and dish out its own pressure in response. Using Whole Hog against a Winston who just jumped in is pretty much a free kill. Linking onto this, Whole Hog also isn't a bad counter or displacement tool against Nanoblades. You're guaranteed to force deflect, and you'll certainly buy time for your team to respond to the Genji. Lastly, you can use it to boop tanks or DPS into bad positions or land environmental kills, but for the most part, you'll likely be using Whole Hog to finish off and or guarantee kills thanks to the extreme damage up close. Now onto Hog's playstyle, positioning and communication. As stated prior, one of Hog's playstyles as being a solo flanker is now completely dead as of the removal of his one-shots, so that playstyle is in the dumps. Hog's playstyle now is more of a budget Zarya and budget Sigma, looking to spam and threaten decent distances like Sigma, but also using your thickness and high damage up close to bully enemy tanks. Let's walk through some examples. On Coliseo neutral, this is where I think Hog would be best. There's not many flanks available, so you don't have to worry about trying to one-shot flankers, the midsection is very narrow and spammable, and most importantly, you have plenty of cover to use so you don't feed, and enough cover to walk up and brawl the enemy tanks. On Route 66 attack, you could play underneath the gas station forcing point pressure and brawling whoever touches. You could also threaten enemies on high ground with your shotgun, similar to how you do so on another poke brawl hero like Zarya. And lastly, on the Paul Shrine, you weave around the central pillar, looking for cheeky hooks onto enemies down main or onto enemies to your sides. The main issue with Hog in these scenarios is that it's quite easy to feed. You don't have a shield unlike Sigma or bubbles like Zarya to help take space. Your hitbox is also galaxy sized, which doesn't really help either, but considering your one shot is gone, this is likely the best you can do for now. Now onto Hog's tank matchups. I'm going to split this up into the dive tanks being Winston, D.Va, Wrecking Ball and Doomfist, and the poke brawl tanks being the rest of them. Hog into the dive tanks. Especially against heroes like Doomfist and Winston, you can really bully these heroes up close. Land as much damage onto the dive tanks before they actually dive to make their dive more dangerous, and look to bully them up close with your shotgun. Alternatively, when they dive, you can look to threaten the enemy squishies as you would on a hero like Zarya, thanks to your bulk and more consistent damage.
In this example, we can see Zarya pressuring in frontline with her Reaper, which forces gladiators to take a weak dive that the backline have a good chance of surviving, especially with the nano. Meanwhile, the threat of the Zarya in frontline stops Gladiator's backline from pushing up and following through with the dive, which buys the time her backline needs to clear the divers.
Now onto Hog against the poke brawl tanks. If you get outranged by heroes like Sigma and Ramattra, or the enemy tank lacks sustain like a Zarya, look to brawl up close. If you actually get outbrawled up close by heroes like Orisa and Reinhardt, look to soften them up from afar before meeting up close. Have smart cover usage to regenerate not just your cooldowns, but also your HP pool, and good luck out there. Well, that's it for the guides. I hope you found something valuable out of the mess that is this hero right now, so a like on the video would be appreciated. If this video also helped to raise your gamer IQ, be sure to share it with your friends to also raise theirs. Until next time.